Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? How's your weather, people? How's your weather? By the sound of it, Dan Cullen has got some rain. He's put on about 3 stone due to the mud on his boots. Here, just very, very blowy. Good morning to P. McHugh and Sons over on Instagram. Good morning also to Mark Whiting, who is just walked through the virtual doors. Ken Hatcher is here as well. Morning, Ken. How's the weather down in Welsh Wales? Dan, let us have a weather update where you are. I'm not going to ask Gary Muirhead how the weather is because the WhatsApp group has already got photographs of him down by the port, probably a moment or two away from the first beer of the day, if he hasn't started already. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're fit and well. Question for you. You know my morning monologue. If you're here on a regular basis, do you think it's overly negative? Had a long conversation last night on Demolition Insider with somebody telling me that I'm sounding like a broken record, constantly bitching and whining. Yeah, am I? Let us know. Love to hear from you. Ken Hatcher says he's got rain, but it's just stopping. Good to hear. Chris Ford says, morning gang. We're a bit wet this morning. Plus side, no dust. No dust at all. Good to hear. Dan Cullen saying, let's rock and roll. Let's get together and keep entertained. I will do my level best, Dan. In fact, without further ado, let me roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get the show on the road. And I'm going to do this quickly, but basically because we've got one film here. It's 8 minutes long, and it's about cranes and whiskey. We'll get there in a second, but first, this. I'm going to say good morning to Alex Latham, who is... Cornwall only has 2 settings weather-wise, doesn't it? Glorious or hideous. That's your settings down in Cornwall. Hope you're having a good time down there. Apparently, no, quite interesting, not boring. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. Listen, I do my best. Keeps us up to date with the issues in the industry, which is correct. Yeah, I mean, part of the conversation went off into, well, yeah, you're always moaning about this and moaning about that. Have you come up with any solutions? Just for the record, I'm a journalist. That's all I do is present the news. You don't really expect, I can't even think of the name of a newsreader these days, but you don't expect a newsreader to come on and say there's problems in Gaza. And here's how to fix them. I've already funded it. I've already taken care of it. I've spoken to the people in power. We'll have that result. That's not how journalism works. Our job is to hold up a mirror. There you are. That's what the industry looks like. There you are. There you are. Dan Cullen says you changed the chat again for the better. We had a bit of a mixed bag on that. I can show you. That's the other way of viewing the chat, which will only come into play when we've actually got some chat going on. Jim Turner's just arrived as well. Good morning, Jim. I will press your button right now. There you are. Yeah. We started using this yesterday. I'm not entirely sure. It's very small. If you're watching on a computer, laptop, desktop, I think it's absolutely fine. I think if you're watching on a mobile device, probably not worth even bothering. So for the rest of the morning, I think I'm going to just switch it off. There you are. So yes, it is. It is Tuesday, the 3rd of June. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. In today's show, an unfamiliar name, possibly, in the grader business. We're on the whiskey trail with Liebherr. JCB comes up smelling of roses just in time for the Chelsea Flower Show, and how Caterpillar is driving towards an electric future. Plus, and I did kind of key this up yesterday, but I'm going to tell you all about it now. In my morning monologue today, which is called Out of Pocket, how workers and operators are helping to prop up the finances of the industry. You can look forward to that. Now, there is no mystery machine today. I'm still trying to figure out how to make it more fair and more competitive. So for now, let me just remind you instead of today's question of the day, which I've got here, there. Yeah, our quiz is this. What is the most ridiculous or pointless piece of paperwork you've ever had to fill out? Now, I've had quite a few over the years, but there's one in particular that really stands out. I visited a demolition site once, and in order to gain access, it's very secure, this site. In order to gain access to the site, I had to send my full name, address details, date of birth, complete with a scan of my passport to verify that I was who I said I was. And when I arrived, I had to take my passport with me. When I arrived on the site, I was presented with a piece of paper that was already pre-printed with my name, address, and date of birth. And then just below that was a form to fill in, which required me to fill in my name, my address, and my date of birth. I questioned it with the guy on the gate, and he just, well, you know, you're not the first person to have mentioned it, but crack on. That's what I've had to deal with. What about you? The most pointless, preposterous, ridiculous piece of paperwork you've ever had to encounter? Let's have a look. Boo, says Peter McKenna. I'm here. How are you doing? Peter McKenna seems to flit. He flits like a social butterfly. Sometimes he's on LinkedIn. Sometimes he's on Facebook. Sometimes he's over on YouTube. Never know where he's going to pop up. But he's here anyway. Morning, Peter. Hope you're fitting well. Dan Keller says, oh, shucks. Yeah, Mystery Machine on a hiatus. I thought I'd found out a way to do it yesterday where I could kind of twist the image to make it very, very hard to identify. Didn't really work. I'm not comfortable with it. So I will come back to that. And pointless pieces of paperwork. Peter says a CV. How many? Here's another question for you, just to mull over while you're having your breakfast break. How many times have you used a CV? Do you have a CV? Are you required to have a CV, or are all jobs these days by word of mouth? Love to hear from you. I know we've all got. Well, I say we. I know you've all got cards that sort of verify you can do what you say you can do. But what about CVs? Do you have CVs? Let me know. Let me know in the chat. We're going to be right back after a smidgen of this. Peter says he's having a large discussion on here, which is over on LinkedIn, about drivers hitting bridges and that cognitive overload could be a factor. I'm interested. I'm genuinely interested. How are you defining cognitive overload? Is it too much on their minds? Is it too much to think about while driving an HGV? But let me know. I'm interested because does that cognitive overload potentially impact over in our part of the business? Be interested to know. Dan Cullen, question of the day: signing multiple papers for RAMs and inductions, ridiculous. Yeah, you'd have thought by now, particularly given the fact that a lot of the sites you're signing in by iPads and stuff, you were clearly in attendance, so long as you weren't asleep. Does it make any sense? Dan says, I haven't used a CV in 15 odd years. I was expecting that. Peter, very similar. I've got a CV, only used it twice in all my working years. I've not had a CV 37 years, genuinely. Ken Hatcher, never had a CV, only 2 jobs in 40 years. Now there is a loyal employee. And clearly doing his job properly, because the companies that he's employing him are clearly looking after him and keeping him on board. Jim Turner says, I've been in full-time work since 16, never used a CV. This is a CV wasteland in the field of demolition and construction. Peter McKenna, processing too much information could possibly cross over into plant and machinery operators. I'd be interested to get, when the show's over, Peter, I'm going to pop over to LinkedIn and have a proper look at this, because I'm very interested in this. We've talked about issues with fatigue and that kind of thing. I wonder, and guys, you are, particularly those that are using machines with lots and lots of bells and whistles, display screens and GPS and sat nav and Uncle Tom Cogley and all. Do you ever sit there and think, oh, Fucking hell, I've got so much on my mind. Dear, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if you think you're processing too much information. And just going back about, where was it? There you are, Dan Collins, signing multiple papers for rams and inductions, ridiculous. Think about that. You go to a pre-start briefing or whatever it might be. You've got to do this, do that, but don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And while you're about it, can you do this? Can you do that? Our aim to do it. Have you ever left one of those meetings and, oh, Jesus, fucking, what am I doing? What? Is that cognitive overload? Love to know. Right, okay, should we crack on? Yes, I think we should. When I think of graders, there are a few names that spring immediately to mind. You know, Caterpillar, Komatsu, Bell, for example. Anyone ever heard of Power Plus? Me either.
The Power Plus PP14G motor grader sets a new precedent for Power Plus machinery. Engineered only with field-tested components, you can be assured of its reliability and durability. Through extensive testing across terrain and climatic conditions, Power Plus motor graders boast exceptional control and precision. Featuring a moldboard width of 4,268 millimeters with an operating weight of 16,000 kilograms and a rated power of 190 horsepower at 2,200 RPM, this sleek and versatile machine does not fall short of performing.
There you are. Now, Dan Cullen says, I've heard of Power Plus, but on a screen in the cab. Yeah, absolutely. Must admit, when that crossed over my radar yesterday afternoon, I thought, how have I not? But I mean, obviously, American brand. Whether they're actually available this side of the pond, I'm not entirely sure. Going back to cognitive overload, which I'm really interested in, I have to say. Jim Turner says, I don't get worn out when I'm doing something I enjoy. I wonder if people do, though. I wonder if people do. Going back even further still, Dan Cullen says, question of the day, talking about ridiculous bits of paperwork. I was on a site once and they asked for a passport or birth certificate to get on site. When I said you have no right, took it up with the company and they dropped it. It's only a building site, not a prison. Yeah, does seem a little bit intrusive, I have to say. Dan Cullen saying not a lot of info on that. No, there wasn't. I'm quite glad. That was just a minute of the Power Plus grader, which is just as well because we need to make room for our next film, which is 8 minutes long. Don't often stray over into the world of cranes because there are other people that do it way better than I do. But on this occasion, given that it's Liebherr and given that it's their usual epic movie quality, I've decided to play it. Back after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Under normal circumstances, I would suggest that cranes and whiskey would be best kept apart. But on this occasion, they kind of belong together. Take a look.
An LTM 1230-5.1 travels through the legendary Scottish Highlands. Its destination is just over 200 kilometers away as the crow flies, but the crane will take 4 whole days to reach its destination. Its destination, a distillery where a boiler needs to be installed. Its route initially leads along small roads through breathtaking landscapes. After a 2-hour journey, it reaches Loch Kishon, a stopover for the 230-ton crane at the harbour.
So the crane was completely stripped down, the fly jib, the hook block and all the counterweight off the crane to take the crane down to a maximum of 60 tonne for travelling on our road.
From here, it continues its journey on board the landing craft Carly.
2022, Stoddart Crane Hire were approached by White & Mackay to plan and logistically get their boiler to site. Unfortunately, due to restraints with Calmac, with the ferry service, the axle loadings on the crane were too high. So we discussed planning with Ferguson Transport and Shipping to take the boiler and the crane in by sea from Kishorn on a landing craft.
To ensure that transport by water runs smoothly, the weather and sea conditions must be right. The LTM 1230-5.1 will spend 2 days and nights on board the Carly, cruising through the islands of the Inner Hebrides. After 130 nautical miles, i.e. 250 kilometers, the Carly will reach the island of Jura, where it will return to land in the Bay of Small Isles via a temporary jetty that was built especially for the landing of the 230-ton vessel. However, before the mobile crane can get solid ground under its wheels, it first has to wait for the tide. The tide at the jetty is 1 meter. Only when the maximum tide has been reached can the unloading of the crane begin. The team from Starlot's Crane Hire routinely takes their LTM off the ship. This is nothing unusual for them.
Yeah, we work on islands weekly. We always have cranes working on the islands. Another interesting job at the moment, we're working up on Unst, which is the most northerly point of the UK, where we're building a space station just now for launching rockets.
There are now only a few kilometers to go to the site. There is only one road on Jura. However, it is not designed for heavy loads such as those of the 230-ton cranes. To reduce the ground pressure, the track was therefore protected with metal plates.
The distance from our temporary slipway to the site was a total of 2 miles. This was the shortest route for taking the equipment in. There was the public terminal, which was a 10-mile trip, but unfortunately due to the road conditions and the roads built on peat, we felt that this was not the way forward for the movement. The narrow roads can become difficult for us, but we pick our cranes wisely for these jobs, and thankfully to Liebherr's product with removable ballast and taking crane weights down excessively, it makes a big difference for us on the narrow roads.
As planned, the crane reaches its destination, the Jura distillery in Craic House, after 4 days. Now it's just a case of reversing up the hill and manoeuvring through the narrow company premises. No problem, thanks to the traction gearbox and hill start aid. This deployment was planned and tested for feasibility for 2 years. Even divers are involved in the construction of the temporary jetty. A new boiler will be installed here tomorrow. It is part of the modernisation project of one of Scotland's oldest distilleries.
The reason for the project is basically to lessen the carbon footprint that the company we're making as a whole in White and Mackay. So this is our first biomass burner to go in on site, with hopefully more to follow in the future with this being successful, getting rid of the use of fossil fuels and moving to more sustainable and renewable sources. We're in warehouse number 1, accompanied by 5,000 to 6,000 bourbon barrel casks. Jura is one of the oldest distilleries in Scotland you'll find making malt whisky. I think the best whisky in Scotland comes from the areas where you can get the most pure water. Our water is all sourced naturally from the Market Loch, so it's about a mile north of the distillery here. Jura's often mistaken in thinking that when you go to Jura you're going to get a peated whisky, but the majority of our spirit, completely unpeated, light, fruity, vibrant. Lovely.
One week after the LTM 1230-5.1 started in Muir of Ord, the headquarters of Stoddart Crane Hire, the time has finally come. The lifting begins. Crane and crew defy the pouring rain. After all, the schedule is tightly timed. The tides dictate the time for the crane's return journey on the landing ferry. When a maximum flood level is reached again in 4 hours, the operation must be completed. Everything goes according to plan.
The boiler's total weight was 40 tonne in weight, which we reversed to the front of the crane and picked up at a 14-metre radius and positioned at a 14-metre radius onto the plinth.
After the work is done, there's even time for a drink at the bar of the Jura Hotel. But only with a diluted Coke for the final photo. Thanks guys, and cheers. Or rather, in Gaelic, sláinte.
Worthwhile, I think. As I say, don't normally do cranes, but there you are. Dan Cullen says, one road in, yeah, absolutely, just one road on the entire island. 2 years in planning, that was. 2 years in planning. Ken Hatcher says, that's a well-managed job, you're totally right. Dan asked the question, I wonder why they put a whiskey distillery in such a precarious place. My guess is, well, first of all, the guy said in the film there about the purity of the water there, but I would imagine that distillery originally, probably not as big as it is now, but I would imagine it was purely there to serve those that live on the Isle of Jura. But obviously it is now part of a bigger conglomerate and they're shipping it abroad. But yeah, interesting stuff. Ken Hatcher said that's a well-managed job. Peter McKenna says, I've sent you a couple of links you might find interesting. Cognitive overload for plant operators occurs when their mental capacity is exceeded by the demands of their work, leading to potential errors and decreased efficiency. You have my interest, Peter. You have piqued my interest. Enda O'Doherty over on Instagram just said, very interesting product. Thank you very much indeed, Enda. Can I assume that you're in Ireland? I'm guessing you're of Irish descent. Are you in Ireland? Whereabouts in the world are you? I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, fantastic project from the fine folks at Liebherr. We're off to the flower show in a moment with JCB.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I don't know, frankly, when the Chelsea Flower Show takes place, but whenever it is, it's a perfectly good opportunity for JCB to show off their environmental credentials, like this. Just going back to Ender over on Instagram. Dan Cullen says he's in the UK and he's a pal of mine. Welcome, Ender. Welcome indeed. Welcome indeed. Jim Turner going back to the Isle of Jura. Looks like it would have been easier to design the position of the tank in place where the wagon could back, then jack the tank up and draw out the lorry. Then no need for the crane. I would imagine if you're dealing with sketchy roads and ancient buildings, you kind of have to deal with what you've got. I'm not an expert, but I wonder if you do. Dan Cullen says, I think the flower show is done and dusted. It could well be. The only one I'm ever aware of is the Hampton Court Flower Show, which, I mean, I don't know when it is, but I know whenever I need to go to the airport via Hampton Court, it seems to be on. It seems to be on just to get in my way. I won't be going that way on Sunday. I'll be going a completely different way entirely. We've got one film left for you, and then it's morning monologue time. So let me get this out of the way, and I'll tell you what's up next. Yeah, Caterpillar has been with us for 100 years now. They're still pioneering, they're still innovating. This is their work in the field of electric drivetrains. Fine job, Caterpillar. Still pushing the boundaries. Going back to Jim Turner, who says, going back to that Isle of Jura film with Liebherr, the tank had to be hauled up there anyway, so the only thing they needed, the crane, was for the positioning. It's a fair point. It's a fair point. Is it? I don't know. Listen, cranes are not my area of expertise. If Tristan Mays is watching, what did you make of it? Because you know more about this stuff than I do. Anywho, people, that's about it for the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. It's another serious one. I'm hoping it's not overly negative, because apparently we do have people that believe it to be too negative. I don't care. If you can't stick around, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Hope to see you again very soon. If you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back immediately after this. And just so you know, Peter, I'm going to check out all things about cognitive overload after the show. Dan Cullen, have a great day, guys. I'll be listening. Gotta get To it. Go and do your thing, Dan. I'm going to I'm going to get to it in just a second with the morning monologue after this. It's late. You're on your way home after a tough week. The motorway zooms past in a blur as headlights bounce off the rain-slick tarmac, causing you to squint your eyes. You're concentrating on the road ahead, on getting yourself home safely. But there's something else playing on your mind. You're thinking about that hydraulic hose that went pop mid-morning. That cost you 98 quid because yet again, your company doesn't have an account with the local supplier. The receipt is still in the glove box. Your bank balance is in the red. Your mortgage is due in 4 days, and Your mortgage is due in 4 days, and you know that you won't be reimbursed immediately because it's the weekend. This is not about wages. This is about the money you spend to keep your company moving. The cash that leaves your hands, your debit card, and your overdrafts. Money you may or may not see ever again. These are companies turning over millions. Multinationals, firms with slick logos on websites full of waffle about sustainability. But behind the curtain, it's lads like you buying the fucking milk. Let's talk about that, shall we? Word comes down from on high. Directors will be visiting the site tomorrow. Make sure it looks tidy and get some refreshments in. So at 6:58 a.m, you're in Tesco, bleary-eyed, buying tea bags, milk, instant coffee, sugar sachets, and 4 packets of digestive biscuits. You're not hosting a tea party, but you pay £12.83 because, God forbid, the top brass get the wrong impression. There is no petty cash tin. There is no company card. There's just you, your wallet, and the unspoken understanding that keeping up appearances is your responsibility. And you know the best part? You might get that £12.83 back after a 6-week wait, after chasing the office, after submitting the receipt, the form that goes with the receipt, and possibly a blood sample as well. And even then, the reply might be, you didn't get authorization, because obviously in the heat of a 7 a.m. milk emergency, you should have rung the regional manager for written consent. And that's just tea and biscuits. Let's get into the real costs. Fuel. We all know this one. You're heading to site and the fuel card bounces. Declined. Again. Maybe hit the limit, maybe the payment is overdue. So what do? Ring the office and sit in the forecourt like a lemon for an hour? No. You tap your own card. £74.20. Gone. Just like that. Because the lads have to get to site. The job has to be done. Then there's the job that runs late. You were told you'd be done and dusted by 5 p.m. But at 8:30, you're still on site, packing up. Company digs? Not booked. So it's down to you. £89 for a last-minute travel lodge room. You text the boss. Just sort it, he says, and send the receipt. You do. 3 days later, the accounts department comes back and says, we need the VAT breakdown. You send it. Then there's silence. Weeks pass. That £89? It's gone. Just like your patience. At this point, you're not just running the job, you're financing it. And here's the thing, this isn't rare. This isn't just how it is. For many, this is standard operating procedure. You are the interest-free loan system propping up the construction and demolition industry. Every parking ticket because there was no legal bay, every litre of fuel, every bottle of screen wash, every set of AA batteries for the radio in the site cabin, every mop and bucket bought after someone missed a target in the site toilet before an HSE inspection. It's not just the graft they rely on, it's your wallets. Those at the top, well, they're fine. Expenses pre-approved, company American Express card, hotels booked in advance, and a full English on the company dime. You're sat in the van with a sorry-looking Greg sausage roll and a sinking feeling, hoping your debit card doesn't get declined. And it eats away at you. You don't talk about it, you just absorb it. You tell yourself, it's only a tenner, or I'll chase it next week. You don't want to be that bloke, the moaner, the whinger, the problem. But it's not just one tenner, is it? It's 10 here, 20 there, 70 on fuel, 100 on digs. It's hundreds, sometimes thousands over the course of a year. And then there's the fear of rocking the boat, fear of being seen as difficult, fear of them being passed over for the next job or the next contract. And the fear doesn't end there. When you finally make it home, long after the kids are asleep, your partner's on the sofa half watching telly, you slip away for a moment and open your banking app. You don't even flinch anymore. You just hope the wages clear before the mortgage payment goes out. You pray the refund hits before the direct debits bounce. You stare at what little money you have left, not really sure anymore what is actually yours. The truth is, you're not just a worker, you're an unpaid creditor. You're a financial lifeline. You're the quiet, overdrafted, over-relied upon backbone of the business. Not that anyone would ever put that in writing. And they'll never even say thank you. They'll never notice the biscuits. They'll never know you fronted the fuel or bought the hose or picked up a mop and scrubbed piss off the floor so a visiting director didn't soil his loafers. It's 11:59 at night. Your wife has gone to bed and you're looking once again at your banking app, hoping, praying that when the clock strikes midnight, the money you're owed will miraculously appear. If it does, maybe you'll take your wife for a coffee over the weekend. Seems only right since you've bought coffee for everyone else for the whole month. But what if it doesn't? There you are. There you are. That is my morning monologue for today. For the person that thinks I'm being overly negative, sorry. There we are. Jim Turner says, it's called Mark's Morning Monologue. It's bound to have a degree of negativity. You are right. It does get a bit like that. I do want to do something a little bit more upbeat. I'd like to think that my trip to Italy might refresh and renew and reinvigorate. Gary Muirhead has just arrived all the way from Turkey. Good morning, guys. How are we all doing? Gary, aside from the fact that I'm a negative Nancy, we're doing just about fine. Good of you to be with us. Jim Turner says, whenever I do them a favour, I make sure they've done me one too. The problem is, and listen, I'm not saying that companies deliberately do this, but there is an implication, isn't there? There is an implication. The directors are coming. You need to make sure that the site office is spick and span. Make sure they've got tea and coffee and everything else. Now, up until that point, it would have been every man for himself. You were bringing flasks with you. The guys that you're working with were doing exactly the same. But now the directors are coming, so now it all needs to be spick and span. The toilets need to be spotlessly clean. Somebody might even have to go out and buy a kettle because there isn't one, because you've never needed one. But now the directors are coming. There you are. And what about those occasions when the fuel card doesn't work? Now, bearing in mind, I used to have an All-Star card for my company account, and only once or twice did it ever happen to me. I think one of them was my card. My card had expired and I hadn't received the new one, and I tried to pay and that didn't work. So obviously that's partly on me, partly on the company. But another time there was some sort of hold up with the payment on my card and a bunch of others at the same place that I worked. Went to pay for a tank full of petrol on my way to work. Nope, no can do. So who pays? You do. And then you have to wait. And back in the day when I was doing what I used to do for a living, like a full-time journalist, I would submit my expenses, and you were required to submit them by, I don't know, whatever it was, the last Tuesday of the month or whatever it might be. If you got them in on time, you might get that money back within a week. If you were an hour or two late, if you happened to be away, which happened a lot, you didn't get them for another 5 weeks. And one of the things, it always seemed to be the case when I was doing that for a living. You'd be abroad, so you'd go and do a Bauma or an Intermat or a Samota or a Conexpo, and you'd rack up a huge amount of expenses, wining, dining, 69ing, the usual sort of thing. You'd rack up all these expenses, but you were away at the point that you were, this is pre-email and everything else, you were away at the time that you were supposed to submit your expenses. So by the time you got back, you might have 500, 1,000 quid worth of expenses. Hotels, meals, taxes, all the things that go with it. You've got 1,000 quid, you've submitted it. You've got to wait for 5 weeks for that. sometimes 6 if there happen to be a holiday in the middle of it. There you are. Gary Muirhead, you're just like a battery, Mark. Every negative side, you have a positive side too. Yeah, well, I don't know, but I do wonder sometimes. It's like these actors that always say they like playing the bad guys. There is a bit of me that kind of enjoys showing them, not always the bad, but showing the other side, the bit that nobody talks about. Garvin over at Instagram, Mostly Digger, says they'll never notice all the grease I bought to keep machines right while it's still on order. There you are. There's another one, and let's be honest, grease, oil, things like that, they're not cheap. They are not cheap. And if you're doing it all the time, you can rack up quite the bill. Thank you for that, Garvin, and good morning to you, my friend. Jim Turner says, no, that's not Jim Turner. That's Jim Turner. I never accept being taken for a lemon. So I always come out equal or better off. It's the only way I play the game of life. The problem you've got, and listen, Jim, we've said this before, you are that type. You're big, beardy, and scary, so you can get away with some stuff. There are others that are a bit more easygoing that maybe aren't quite that way. And if you've, what do you do? I mean, genuinely, we've got people here with a lot of experience. You go to, you're in the works van, you're on the way to work, you need to top up with diesel, you go into the local garage, you fill her up, you go in, you show them your fuel card, and they go, no. What do you do? Do you phone your local manager, your regional manager? Do you phone the head office? Bearing in mind, if you are working in construction, you are probably on the road a good 2.5 hours before the head office even opens. So what do? Do you sit there for 2.5 hours, twiddling your thumbs, waiting for somebody to phone you back and saying, do this or do that? Or do you just tap your card and hope that they'll pay you back? I know which way I would go, uncomfortable though it may be. Dan Cullen says, like this company, you pay your expenses, they take 20% of it as well as already being taxed. So you're taxed 2 times, losing on bills. I've often bought grease too, like this hotel malarkey they won't pay what I paid for the room and food. There you are. And how much is that shortfall? I mean, we used to have that thing. What did they used to call it? Subsistence, I think they called it when I was working for a publishing company, and they would allow you. And I'm going back a long while, so I think they used to allow us like 40 quid a night for hotel and food. I think it was 40 quid. Now, bear in mind, this is the late 80s, so 40 quid was quite a lot of money back then. So they'd allow you 40 quid. But if you were in a bind and you ended up having to stump up 45 quid or, extreme circumstances, 50 quid, you didn't get that 10 quid back. That was just, well, it's just the way it goes. Hang on a minute. I'm here. I'm here working for you. It's not my fault that the hotels here are more expensive. It's not my fault that I'm stuck here. It's not my fault that I'm working out of hours for you. Why should I have to pay the difference? I did get them over on one once. I'd done back-to-back black tie events like Lighthouse Club dinners and awards dinners and stuff, and I was constantly renting a tuxedo. And it was costing like 70 quid a time. So in the end, the publisher that was ultimately my boss said, you keep hiring these things. Why don't you just go and buy one? Just go and buy one and have done with it. I said, okay, how much can I spend? And he said, well, you're hiring them at 70 quid 3 times. If you can get one for 200 quid, do that. And I went and I looked and I found a really nice one for 300 quid and snuck the receipt past him. I did. Doesn't fit me anymore, sadly, but it was very, very nice. Jim Turner says, I'm very easygoing unless I think someone is taking the piss. Then I go right the other way. In this instance, I don't think that's necessarily... It shouldn't be necessary. I mean, there will be extremes, and Gary would be a good example of this. You know, if you're working up in the wilds of Scotland on a wind farm, for example, the chances of having a Pertec depot within 20 miles of you, somewhat remote, I would say. So maybe you are relying on a local supplier, and maybe your company doesn't have an account with them. So maybe you do have to pay through. But should that not be there you are, there's the money back, cash or whatever it might be. Should that not be? Peter McKenna, for some reason, is over on Instagram as well. I don't know why. But Peter, you're making our audience look even better. We've got people all over the place. And he's also over on YouTube, just to prove that he can. Peter, you need to get yourself a life. How are you watching me in triplicate? Peter McKenna says he's come to Facebook because LinkedIn has started lagging. Dan Cullen says they only allow you £15 a night away. It's ridiculous. What are you supposed to do with £15 a night? I mean, bearing in mind, and I don't do this very often, but the last time I went to McDonald's, I think it was 11 quid. Is that really? You know, bearing in mind they expect you to be firing on all cylinders the following day. 15 quid. Jim Turner says, as for the diesel question, I'd pay the bill and go to work, ring up the office and tell them how much I owe. Fair comment. Dan Cullen says, this is what's pushing my buttons. I'm usually easy to work with, but they're taking the piss. Yeah. Gary Muirhead says, it makes you laugh when you see these MPs claiming for a £3.50 sandwiches on expenses when they're making 150 grand plus, absolutely greedy. Yeah. I just astonishing, some of the things. You know, I mean, cleaning of their moat. That was a good one, wasn't it? Peter McKenna, going back to cognitive overload. Apparently, writers suffer from cognitive overload, and it results in writer's block. I realise I'm tempting fate here. Never, ever, ever suffered. I mean, literally. I'm bearing in mind what I do here. Those morning monologues that I do, I wrote those on a daily basis. They're somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 words a day. I've been doing those morning monologues now for 18 months. So there's probably, blimey, 23, let's say there's 300 of them. No, it's more than that. No, about 300 of them. Never missed a day. In fact, I even have some up the pipe just in case I do ever struggle. Never suffered with writer's block. Cognitive overload, I think I've probably had a bit of that, where you sometimes sit and, oh, Jesus. So, do you know when I find it? And I think I find it most when I'm out of my comfort zone, when I'm doing things like video editing, which is not really my forte. I sometimes sit here and think I've completely lost track of what I'm doing. I don't know what bit of file goes where. I don't know where I've stored it. I don't know what story I'm trying to tell. It goes just head is on the verge of exploding. I think I suffer then, but not with writing. Peter also says HGV drivers get $27.50 a night for sleeping in their trucks. Doesn't I mean, $27.50 for sleeping seems okay, but let's be absolutely honest. I mean, now this is where I go off at a slight tangent. Would I want to sleep in a truck? Yes, I would. I would love that. I love sleeping in confined spaces. I would see that as something of a treat. Possibly not long term, but short term, I'd be quite happy with that. But £27.50 for being away, completely isolated, completely on your own, which is something I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, by the way. I'll come back to that in a moment. Peter says, Dan, the overnight allowance for contractors is 25 quid. Jim says, if they've quibbled about the bill, I'd set the time they need to have it paid for, or I'll be off elsewhere. But I'd be ringing the boss direct to tell them that. Yeah. But again, I go back to that. I've said this with people in the past. I've been down this road where I've been owed a lot of money. I've been in business, self-employed now for 35 years. I've been through 2, possibly 3 recessions, a couple of them pretty serious ones. And you struggle to get paid. And one of the biggest problems, aside from the fact, you're worried about putting food on the table, paying your mortgage and everything else, one of the biggest problems I've had is the fact that it is such a distraction. It's not just that you're owed the money, it's the fact that you're having to take your time when you could be earning money elsewhere, but you're having to devote that time to chasing money that you are rightly owed. I think I find that a real problem. I really, really do. Gary says, you get enough money for staying away from home. What usually happens is you end up going to the pub at night and spend more money than you would being at home. Yeah. You could well do. And listen, I mean, I've ended up staying in places where you literally, middle of nowhere. We all know what demolition construction looks like. You're in the middle of nowhere. The only place to eat is the hotel restaurant or the hotel bar, and you're paying through the nose for something fairly bland. If you were in a town or something, you could probably pick yourself up at a half reasonable Chinese for 10 quid. But no, you're out in the middle of the wilds, and it's jugged hare at 15 quid a portion or whatever it might be. Don't know where jugged hare came from. I quite like jugged hare though. Now, there was something. Funny part is these are £1 million profit companies, and they're so tight. Yeah, well, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they're so well off. Now, there was a thing here. Yes, sleeping in their trucks. So I was thinking yesterday about the cab of a machine. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking about an excavator, but it doesn't matter. Wheel loader, dozer, but it doesn't honestly matter. And I was thinking about how those cabs, depending on the site, depending on the company you're working for, depending on the project or the application, and depending upon your mindset, those cabs can be either a cell or a sanctuary. If you've got a lot going on, if you'd rather be at home, if you've got problems and you've got nothing to think about, you're almost working on autopilot, and your brain is doing 10 to the dozen, worried about something, finances, the family, the kids, the wife, whatever it might be. A machine cab on your own would be a very, very, very bad place to be. And yet the flip side of that is, if all is well, the sun's shining, you're out where you want to be, you've got the door open, you've got the window open, you've got your music playing, and you're in your happy place. Same place, two very different outcomes. That will be tomorrow's morning monologue. It's 50% written. I'll be doing the other 50% at some point this afternoon. My sister is visiting once again. It would have been my mum's birthday today, so we're getting together. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but we are. I've had a few times over the years when I've not been happy about something. I like to see my gaffers face to face and sort it out. Either get my own way or we part company. Yeah. Again, I think there is a degree of personality there, but also think about the timing. If we are in the middle of a boom, or if you are fortunate enough to be working in one of the major urban conurbations, London, Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle, whatever, there's plenty of work out there. If you decide that you're going to tell your gaffer to poke his job where the sun don't shine and have it on your toes, happy days. You do that on a Thursday, you'll probably be on a fresh start by Monday. Not a problem at all. What about if you're out in rural land where there's less construction work? Or what about if it's 2008 and the arse has just fallen out of the entire construction market? It's not quite so easy. And bearing in mind, it's like a domino effect here, if there is a recession going on, maybe the company you're working for hasn't paid their fuel bill, hasn't paid their hydraulic hose bill, hasn't ordered the grease or whatever it might be. So you end up paying for it. And you can't quit because there's not another job to go to. And they're not in any hurry to pay for you or to pay you because they're a bit strapped for cash as well. Peter says, posted on the WhatsApp group for Dan. I'll be having a look at that in a moment. They are sometimes a cell when your brain is in overdrive and a sanctuary when you're enjoying it. Most of the time, I enjoy sometimes, or minor times, it's a sell. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. No different to me. I mean, I don't sit in a cab, but I know if I'm on a long journey on my own, on a plane, a train, or in a car, and all is right with the world, got a podcast playing or got music playing in my ears or whatever it might be, happy days. I'm happy with my own company. But on the rare occasions when I've had my mental issues, being alone for a prolonged period of time is the worst possible place to be. That's what I was thinking about, and that will be tomorrow's morning monologue. Gary says, a lot of these big projects are budgeted in the cost of digs and travel. They're trying not to pay you. I remember working for SSE. I was in a hotel that cost £255 per night and a £30 meal. Not bad. Not bad at all. And of course, this is budgeted in. That's the way it works. That no construction company or a demolition company worth their salt is going to be surprised by the fact that their workers had to travel to get there. If you're a London-based company and you're working in the wilds of Scotland, you'll be expected to stay there. Nobody's expecting you to fucking commute to Glasgow from Essex, are they? They all know that. It's just when there's a fall down. Jim Turner says, the cab is my happy place. Happy or sad? Well, I'm pleased to hear it, Jim. I think Jim may well be impervious to all the mental health issues that we talk about on this show. Mental health is only part of it. I'll tell you more about it tomorrow. I don't want to give the game away, partly because I haven't finished writing it yet. But I will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. as usual. The solitude gives me time to get my head straight, says Jim. And that is precisely, I may even steal that, the solitude gives you time to get your head straight. But what if your head isn't straight? That same solitude could take a problem that's that big and make it the size of the inside of that cab, and possibly bigger still. That's kind of what I've got in mind. I'll flesh it out. I'll come back tomorrow and tell you all about it. And I've also got to do some reading on cognitive overload, thanks to Peter McKenna, who may well have inspired Thursday's morning monologue. We'll see. We'll see what takes my fancy by then. Gary says, I hope you have a fantastic day with with my big sister. She'd laugh to hear that. My big sister is 7 years younger than me and about half my size. But big sister, I may even call her that. Thank you very much indeed, Gary. Enjoy Turkey. Go if you haven't already started, go have a beer, because we all know you've deserved it. I'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. This is almost exactly 1 hour. If I count it down, it is 5 seconds to 1 hour. 3, 2, 1. Goodbye, everyone.